These are the arthropods that live near every house. Without exception, even in Antarctica they live. And of course, they also get into most houses, and are often found in apartments and in separate buildings. So if you come across them in your place, do not be surprised. But no, these are springtails, also known as Collembola. And don't be afraid. They aren't only harmless, but sometimes even useful in some way. And they are very widespread, very numerous and common everywhere. No wonder that people come across them very often. Here is a video, for example, I have received from the viewer for identification. The girl writes in the letter that they are very small and can be seen all over the apartment. Here you can see the springtail well and notice the most characteristic features of its appearance. And here is another one right on my desk. Suddenly I saw it jumping near the keyboard right under my hands, and in absolutely the same way another springtail can end up on your desk or under your bathtub or somewhere else. In another apartment where we lived, springtails appeared in our kitchen on a cutting board, and only on the board. Neither near it nor anywhere else in the kitchen or in the apartment we did not see them, but there were a lot of them exactly on the board. And you can also find them in your home in completely unexpected places. And that is normal. There is no reason for worry or panic in such a situation, because springtails are generally harmless in the house. It is only important to correctly distinguish them from more harmful and even dangerous arthropods of the same size. And this is not so easy to do, in fact, because they are small, very small. Most of them are less than a millimeter in size, and it can be difficult not only to see them, but even to notice them. And this is the first of the signs by which they can be recognized, because not so many arthropods of such a size can live in a clean, well-kept home all the time. Of the most common ones that you are most likely to encounter in your home, either booklice, some mites or springtails have such a sub-millimeter size. And even with a simple magnifying glass, you can easily and relatively reliably tell apart all of these guys, because springtails are very recognizable by their body shape. They have a spindle-shaped body without a decent transition to the head. This distinguishes them from booklice, which head is large and well stand out from the body. In springtails, the body and head appear to be one piece. And right there on the head, there are relatively large, well-defined antennae. When viewed from a distance, they are very striking. The springtail looks like a small dash with such massive antennae. In booklice, these antennae are much thinner. Here in the photo, this combination is clearly visible. A smooth, symmetrical spindle-shaped body with large antennae, the size of which is comparable to the size of the body. Here is another booklouse for comparison. The difference in structure is clearly visible. These same massive antennae distinguish springtails from thrips, with which they are sometimes found together in flower pots. Plus, many thrips are winged, and as a rule live on plants, while springtails do not have wings and stay on the ground and inside the litter without climbing on leaves and shoots. And here is a Gamasid mite next to the springtail. It doesn't have antennae at all, but it does have a fourth pair of legs, which in some species protrude strongly forward. But we must agree, these legs are very different from the Collembola's antennae, and it is easy to distinguish between these arthropods. Very often, by the way, springtails live in apartments together with booklice, and you can find them literally side by side with each other. And if you look closely, you will see that they are different. Here on a video from my viewer is a booklouse, and here is a springtail. Here is another apartment with booklice running around the floor in the room, while around the wall in the toilet springtail is running. And here are some photos from an apartment in Dubai. The guy has a whole ecosystem here. I'll make a separate video about this case. There are booklice and springtails and mites and even some weevils. And presumably all of this lives at the expense of the closet. on the back wall of which water has been dripping from the ceiling for a year and a half, the plywood or the fiberboard there has rotted and the mold spot has appeared there. And if you are as lucky as these guys, you can find all these arthropods, similar in size, literally in one place in your home. And now you can even tell them apart. It is interesting that springtails are not insects. They used to be classified as insects, but now scientists consider Collembola as a separate class, and perhaps they had a common ancestor with insects, but at some point in the past their evolutionary paths diverged. At the same time, springtails, like insects, have 6 legs, but none of them has wings. In this way, they are somewhat similar to apterygotes, such as silverfish, for example, but in many other ways they differ significantly from them, so significantly that they deserve a separate class. Therefore, at least representatives of 3 different classes lived in that very Dubai apartment: arachnids, insects, and Collembola. Its owner could take tours there, like to a zoo. The important thing is that springtails come in different colors and sizes. There are tiny creatures among them, less than half a millimeter in length, and there are species that reach several millimeters in length. There are white ones, yellowish ones, grey and black species. Some even have an intricate pattern on their bodies. It's better not to look at their color, but recognize them by the shape of their bodies. Here, for example, are completely white springtails. And this one, mine, the table one, is grey. And this grey one is bigger than the white ones. Just yesterday, when I was preparing the script for this video, I received an email with 2 cool photos of springtails that showed transverse stripes on the bodies of these arthropods. And the girl who sent them, by the way, asks if these are booklice. And it became clear that the video about identification of springtails had never been more relevant. And perhaps the most obvious identification feature: many springtails jump. They do this with the help of a special organ named furca at the end of their abdomen. Here you can see it jumping in another video from another my viewer. These jumps are not very high, not very big, a few centimeters, but noticeable and unique in their own way. Of the synanthropic arthropods of the same size, except for springtails, only booklice jump. And as we found before, they are clearly distinguished from springtails by their body shape, while, for example, thrips, with which springtails are sometimes confused, do not jump. That same springtail on my table jumps back when I deliberately scare it with my finger. Hop, a jump. Hop, another one. Fleas also jump in a similar way, but it's difficult to confuse them with springtails. Fleas are larger, blacker, have a higher body and bite people. Springtails, on the other hand, do not bite and do not pose any threat to humans at all. Moreover, they do not cause any other harm, even if they settle in apartments. They do not spoil food, do not carry any diseases, and are practically harmless. The only situation when they can cause harm is their mass reproduction in flower pots. Here they can damage plant roots and leaves lying directly on the soil. However, this happens very rarely, and in most cases springtails are confused with thrips, which reproduce en masse on the leaves and shoots of plants and can seriously damage them. And indeed, springtails are in most cases harmless even in pots, and therefore if you have identified them and are absolutely sure that your bugs are definitely springtails, then you can sleep peacefully. Another question is why they appear in apartments and what they do here if they do not bite people, do not bite animals, do not spoil food. What do they feed on here? In fact, springtails live everywhere where there are plants or mold. They feed on decaying plant remains, on fungi, including that same mold, and in some cases on microscopic worms, on nematodes for example. Accordingly, they can live wherever plants or mold grow. And they do. According to scientists' calculations, springtails are the most numerous microscopic, visible to the naked eye, animals on the planet. On every square meter of soil where plants grow, about 100,000 springtails live, all over the planet, in all climate zones, even in Antarctica and Greenland. And of course, there are millions of them around your house. And if there is a damp corner with mold spots inside your house, and springtails can physically get there, they will not miss such an opportunity. I remember as a child I reread Mikhail Osak's book Get Anything But a Crocodile probably hundreds of times. In one chapter, the author described the nuances of feeding poisonous tropical frogs in terrariums and wrote that little young poison dart frogs can be fed with springtails, which are found in large numbers on the surface of the soil in flower pots with indoor plants. I went to check the pots with my mom's plants, but I had no idea what springtails should look like, and I didn't know that they might be hiding under clods of soil and not just running around on the surface of the ground. There was no internet back then, I could not look at the appearance of these creatures, and therefore I didn't find any. But you can take into account that if you come across these guys at home, then perhaps they breed in your flower pots. By the way, while I was preparing this video, I decided to check my pot. My son and I recently planted orange seeds directly into the soil from the garden. The oranges, of course, haven't grown, but a lot of weeds are already sprouting. And yesterday evening I put a potato peel on top of the soil, and today this potato is already chewed by springtails. Here is one crawling, a little thing. Here is the second one. Both are grey, not white, but very small. Less than a millimeter each. Most likely this is a species of poderomorph springtails. This is a grindle worm in heteros. There is a wall biocenosis here. But in the end, yeah, there are springtails swarming just in a portion of the soil in the pot, and with a piece of potato you can attract and capture them. And note that here in the pot they do not prevent these young seedlings from growing and do not harm them in any way. And similarly, they can live in any flower pot in your home. Plus, any moldy place in the house can also attract springtails. In the bathroom, in the toilet, somewhere behind the sink in the kitchen, where garbage can accumulate and a colorful carpet of fungus will grow on it, springtails will live and prosper as in a fairy tale forest. Here, for example, you can clearly see a springtail, and in the background you can hear a washing machine running. So this creature is running either in the bathroom or in the kitchen. By the way, that apartment where we had springtails on the cutting board was on 13th floor of a 16-story building. There were no trees right outside the windows, and the ground with grass was quite far. But nevertheless, from somewhere they got onto this constantly wet cutting board and happily lived on it. Therefore, keep in mind that if there are suitable conditions, springtails can appear in a clean and well-kept city apartment. By the way, there is an interesting case for illustration. The author of the photo writes that he finds these animals after cleaning in the vacuum cleaner in the dust compartment. They are not visible in the apartment, they do not bother anyone, the apartment itself is kept clean and tidy, but when cleaning, the vacuum cleaner sucks them out from somewhere. And here in the apartment they are even useful to some extent. When mold is just appearing and you do not even see it yet because of the tiny size of its mycelium, springtails will already find it and will already start eating it. And maybe save a few corners of your apartment from blackening. For this appetite for mold, springtails are sometimes specially cultivated by terrarium and paludarium keepers. They are simply released into the terrarium as sanitarians and then diligently clean up all the mold here. As a result, in such a warm and humid space, In a real moldy paradise, these arthropods maintain cleanliness and beauty. This is an example of a nursery for springtails. Comfortable conditions have been created for them here. Damp earth, humid atmosphere, rotting banana peel. What else do this baby need to be happy? Here they breed, and then from here they are sent to terrariums with snakes, spiders and scorpions to work, to eat mold, food remains and excrement. In this regard, springtails are similar to booklice, which also often settle in flower pots and simply in damp places in the apartment and also feed on mold among other things. But if some booklice can frankly cause harm in the house by spoiling food, then springtails are not guilty of this. Nevertheless, almost all the people who send me photos and videos of springtails for identification ask how to get rid of them. For some reason, most people don't like the fact that such invertebrates are running around in their houses. Let the corners get wet, let the mold bloom and smell, just so long as there are no springtails. So well, you don't need to do any unique treatment in order to get rid of springtails in your home. Like insects, springtails can be exterminated with almost any insecticidal sprays based on pyrethroids or organophosphorus compounds such as malathion and fenthion, or neonicotinoids or combinations of these insecticides, including the most affordable aerosols that are sold in regular stores. Look for those places in the apartment where there are the most of these guys, where they actively run, and spray all these surfaces with an aerosol. After that, the springtails will die here. And at the same time, of course, try to find out what exactly attracts springtails to these breeding grounds. If it is damp here, you need to eliminate excess moisture. If there are any cracks here to neighboring rooms or to the street, then it needs to be sealed with putty or silicone sealant. If your springtails are found in an apartment only in flower pots, then it's better not to do anything with them at all. Let them live there, recycle all sorts of organic matter there and loosen the soil in your pots. Let them do this small but useful work for you. And once again, do not confuse them with thrips. If the insects reproduce on leaves, then these are thrips, and they need to be exterminated as quickly as possible with any suitable pesticides. If there are no insects on the leaves, springtails are multiplying en masse in the pot and the plant is clearly depressed, and you suspect that it is the springtails that are harming the plant, then you can spray the soil here with an insecticidal aerosol. Or you can try to catch most of the springtails with a piece of potato placed on the soil. Springtails climb onto it, and after a few days you threw it all away. When we found them on the cutting board, we tried to wash it off for several days to save the board somehow, because it is unpleasant when some arthropods crawl on the board on which we cut food. But in the end we couldn't save it. The board was cracked, and when we washed it, water flowed into the crack between these layers. It was all constantly sore inside, springtails most likely multiplied inside it, plus the board was standing near the sink, so it almost never dried out. And in the end we just threw it out and bought a new one. And that's it. The springtails disappeared. So, if we summarize all this, then springtails in an apartment do not present any serious sanitary problem. I have not yet encountered situations, and I have not received any letters about cases of some catastrophic infestations of an apartment with them. In one letter, a viewer complained that there were so many of them in the yard that they were swarming all over the car and the bushes. But at the same time he sent only photos from home, and in the yard he could have some other arthropods on his plants and car. The same thrips, for example, or aphids. Still, it is difficult to imagine springtails crawling out of the soil and clinging en masse to a car, as well as in a house, where they are unlikely to be able to live in any large quantities, because in a normal renovated apartment they will not find enough rotting organic matter for food. Therefore, you should not worry too much when you come across them. If you find them at home, consider them a kind of indicator of high humidity. Something somewhere is getting wet and moldy. Find this wet something, dry it, and that's it. The springtails will disappear. It's only important to be able to figure out that these are exactly springtails. But we have already figured this out. Firstly, they are small, about 1 mm. Secondly, they have a characteristic elongated body with large thick antennae. And thirdly, they jump if you try to touch them with your finger. And if you still can't identify them, then take a photo of them or shoot a video with them so that their legs can be seen in the photo or video. With this resolution, all the details of the structure and color of these creatures are visible and they can be recognized. And send these photos and videos to me. We'll figure out what it is together. And I suppose that with such videos we will undermine a new layer of our neighbors in the apartment, previously unknown to social networks, as it was with the booklice, about which life in the apartment neither YouTube, no articles, no websites knew anything. There was no help for people who might encounter them at home. And if a person found such insects, he or she could not understand that they were booklice. Such a blank information spot. And as soon as I made a video about them, I was immediately inundated with letters with booklice. And it turned out that there are just a terrifying number of them. In fact, they live literally in every new building. And in a lot of not new buildings, there are plenty of them too. I had to buy a separate hard drive to store photos and videos from my viewers only with booklice. Probably they are more numerous than cockroaches, which everyone knows about. At the same time, until people encounter them and until they watch the video, they do not even know that such insects exist. And in general, a lot of people hear such a name, booklice, for the first time. It was exactly the same with Gamasid mites, tropical red mites and red mites. They live in houses, bite people, but people cannot understand in any way that they are mites and that they come from birds' nests. There is no information about them. All the videos, all the articles are only about bedbugs and cockroaches. And it's not so simple with cockroaches either. The situation is the same with forest cockroaches. All over Europe, in North America, at the end of summer, beginning of autumn, they come into houses in droves and people take them for German cockroaches. I can imagine how many treatments were carried out, how many pesticides were poured, how much money was spent in panic from their appearance when people think that these are harmful German cockroaches, although in fact they are harmless forest cockroaches. They do not breed in apartments, and when you come across one of them, it's enough to simply swat it, or even not swat, but just throw it alive out the window. And how many people have already watched the video about them, did not order pest control, and saved a lot of money? Well, I suppose it will be the same with springtails. They live everywhere. People find them in many apartments, but they just do not know what they are and have never even heard their name. And now, since you have watched this video up to this point, you already know that you have springtails under your bathtub or in a flower pot. Or at least know where you can send the photos for identification, if they are not springtails or you think they are not. And we'll see. Maybe they will defeat booklice and it will turn out that there are more of them living in your houses than booklice and mites with cockroaches together. And I will have to buy another SSD for the video with springtails. So identify them, do not panic and do not be sad. Because with animals, even such tiny ones, life is brighter and more fun than without them.